Saddle discomfort can be only two things, or a combination of those two, I guess. It can be a problem with the seat itself, being the wrong shape, not enough padding, it's too wide, it's too narrow, the angle's wrong, something like that. Or it can be a problem with the general position of the rider. So the seat itself is not really the shape is not an issue, but the rider is sitting too high, or their Q factor is too narrow and they're rocking on the seat, or they're sitting twisted on the bike or something like that. And so the saddle is correct for them, but it's uncomfortable because their position is wrong. And then you can have sometimes a blend of the two, where yes, the saddle is probably a bit of a wrong shape, but also the positional discomfort or the positional problems are contributing to the discomfort of the seat. So how do you know which is which? How do you kind of nut out whether we've got a problem with the saddle itself or a problem with the general position? So the easiest two big ones to look for, if you've tried 20 different seats of various different widths and shapes and sizes and none of them really feel any good, it's probably your position. So there are a myriad of different ways which the position can impact the comfort of the seat. For example, if the seat's too far forward, you'll keep sliding back on it in an attempt to get back out behind the bottom bracket and stabilise yourself. So you'll be sitting on a part of the saddle that it's not designed to be sat on, so it'll hurt. If the angle of the seat is wrong, that's a pretty straightforward one. It'll probably hurt. If it's too far nose up, it'll probably press up under the front. If it's too far nose down, you'll get a focalised pressure under the rear of the seat. If the seat's too high, you'll rock on it, which basically pounds your two sit bones into the saddle and makes it unpleasant. If the Q factor is too narrow, you'll rock, which will do the same kind of thing. So there's all these positional quirks, positional problems, which can contribute to saddle discomfort. So if you've tried 20 different seats and you've put them in all different locations and they all kind of hurt, it's probably something wrong with your position. Now, we could talk about this for 3 hours and not cover all of the possibilities. But the biggest ones, I guess, that I see are the seat being too high, meaning that the rider is unstable on the seat and they're rocking under heavy load, and that will make the saddle unpleasant. They'll get inner kind of thigh chafing and friction as their pelvis rocks side to side and it squirrels down and scuffs on the inside edge of the saddle here, or they'll just get sit bone pain from the pressure. If the Q factor is too narrow, if you're riding and your knees are chopping outside the line of the pedal, often that will be accompanied with a rock on the seat. So if there's a lot of instability of the pelvis caused by one of those two things, you'll get that. As a third possibility, you can get that from the cleat position being too far forward. So if you're getting sort of bilateral pressure sensations on the seat and it's scrubbing in these regions and you've tried all these different saddles and it's still happening, look to the seat height, the Q factor, and maybe the cleat position as being sources of the trouble. If you find yourself constantly sliding forward on the seat, perching up on the nose, it is possible that the reach is too long. And similarly, if you find yourself pushing back, it's possible that the reach is too short. Although I find those two things lesser drivers of slip on the saddle than the stuff in the rear of the bike, like the seat height and that kind of stuff. It is possible, particularly if the reach is unbelievably long. If it's more than sort of 30 millimeters too long, yeah, you're probably going to pull forward a bit and then load up the front of the seat. So those are kind of signs, that's the first sign, I guess, that the saddle is not the issue, is that you've tried all these different seats and none of them work. The second big one to look for is if the symptoms of the saddle discomfort are one-sided. So let's say, for example, that you're getting a recurring pressure point or a saddle sore or a friction point on one side. That means that you're not sitting square on the seat. You're either dropping one hip down and forward, or you're twisted, or you've got what we call a lateral shift where your pelvis is actually shifted sideways on the seat, or some combination of all of those things. If it's one-sided pressure, don't bother trying to change the saddle until you get yourself to the point where you can sit squarely on the bike. Now, these are very difficult to resolve yourself. Now, I won't say that they're impossible to resolve yourself, but very, very difficult. If you've got a one-sided recurring problem with the seat, try and find a good bike fit specialist who can help you resolve the asymmetry. So something like, for example, we'll give you a theoretical possibility here. You've got a shorter right leg, which is 5 millimeters shorter than the left, and it's also your dominant leg. Your nervous system, as with a lot of people's nervous systems, if you've got a shorter dominant leg, the rider will often tip their pelvis down and forward on the right-hand side to help them reach through the bottom of the stroke with that shorter leg to kind of keep the leg happy, because it's your dominant leg. Your nervous system is trying to protect it. And as you go forward and down on the right, often the left sit bone, the inferior aspect of your ischiopubic ramus, will shift back and contact the inside edge of the saddle on the opposite side. So you'll get a recurring pressure point on the left-hand side because of a right-sided hip drop. Occasionally you'll actually get it on the right side, but mostly if you're dropping your right hip, you'll get it on the left. It varies between people, but if you've got one-sided saddle discomfort, which is recurring across lots of different seats, stop buying seats. Go and get a good quality bike fit and try and find someone who can figure out why you're dropping your pelvis forward and down on one side. So they're the kind of two big things to look for. You've tried multiple different seats and none of them work. Means it's probably not the seat. And the second thing is asymmetry. So one-sided pressure problems like that. The third one to look for is if you've got a lot of concomitant symptoms, I call them. So let's say your hands are going numb all the time and you've got bilateral frontal knee pain and you keep creeping forward on the seat and the front of the seat hurts. So if you've got a lot of signs of, for example, in that situation of being too far forward all the time, or your seat's too low and you're loading up the front of your knees and sliding forward all the time, if you've got multiple other discomforts other than the seat, that is a good sign that it may not be the seat itself. Creeping forward all the time, creeping back all the time, feeling like you're kind of constantly needing to reshift yourself around on the saddle, and you've got numb feet and your front of your knees are hurting and your hamstrings are feeling like they're overloaded and the reach feels too stretched out. If you've got a lot of things going on, it's probable that the general position is the problem rather than the design of the seat. So they're the big three to look for. There's a myriad of different possibilities for how these things can affect the individual rider. Some people, for example, if the reach is too long, they will not rotate forward and stretch forward and slide forward on the seat. They'll just move their hands back away from the hoods all the time and just sit upright on the tops and never want to reach out into the hood, but they won't move their pelvis. So there's a lot of individual variability with this, but those are certainly the big three to look for. So hopefully this will save some people a whole bunch of purchasing money on saddles. I've personally come across people who've purchased 10, 15 saddles. You know, you're looking at thousands of dollars, and the problem was that their seat was too high, you know, something like that. So as always, a good quality position to start with, and then once everything is really stable and solid, try varying the saddle underneath you and try and find one that's the most comfortable once the rest of the position is good. Hopefully that makes sense.